All right, now we're joined by John Urquhart, who's running for re-election to sheriff. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Thank you. I ran first in 2012. I ran against the incumbent, or at least the acting sheriff. He'd been appointed. First time a sitting sheriff has been defeated. Well, since the sheriff's office started, was in 1852. So I was very proud of that win. I ran on a platform of transparency and accountability. And apparently it must have resonated with the voters because I had a 57% win at the end of the campaign. So I was happy about that. And really what I think I've continued to stress accountability, and I still do, because it's really what defines a police agency, especially in this day and age. If you don't have the support of the community, then you're going to have all kinds of trouble, and you're not really that effective. People oftentimes ask me, what's my biggest challenge as sheriff? What's the biggest problem I face? And that biggest problem is maintaining the trust of the community. And there's certainly the best way to do that is through accountability and let them know that you do hold your deputies accountable. But the other aspect of that is having the trust of the community. And one part of that is being reflective of the community. And I mean that quite literally, looking like the community. And right now, most police departments, and we are no different, they don't look like the community. Most of them look like me, only younger, but still a white male. I've worked very, very hard to change that. Hopefully, when we get into the questions, I can explain a little bit more about that and what I've done to make sure that happens. One of the things I promised when I was running for sheriff is a domestic violence unit. We did get a domestic violence unit funded by the county council, and it's made a huge difference. The number of felony filings of domestic violence in the prosecutor's office has really skyrocketed, and it's because of this domestic violence unit that we've started. 3, 2, 1, I'm done.
Great. So now we have our 4 prepared questions that we're asking all candidates for sheriff. These are 2-minute answers. And Nicole, will you do number 1? Oh, and feel free to turn that over in front of you if you want to read along with us.
Okay.
Looking forward, what are your priorities for the next 4 years?
Well, as I said, maintaining the trust of the community. That is a very perishable commodity. You know, it takes one officer-involved shooting, for example, that is not properly investigated, that is not properly explained, that is maybe not literally covered up, but appears to be covered up. And all the work we've done over my last 4 or 5 years now is gone. So I think that's number 1. Number 2 is continuing to change the complexion of the sheriff's office by more minority hiring. By minority, I mean persons of color certainly, but females as well. So I want to continue to do that. Over half of our business, literally our business is contracts. Almost 60% of the people that work for me work for a customer. And that means rather than just a county council, I've got 12 city councils and 12 city mayors and 12 city managers that I have to keep happy. Got a lot of bosses. And that makes it much more difficult. But the good part about that is unlike any other police department in the area, we actually have customers. My customers, that 60%, can go somewhere else. They can either start their own police department or they can go contract with someone else, which means I have to do a good job for them, not only from the accountability standpoint, but from the business standpoint as well. I have to watch the costs that we charge our customers. So I want to continue that as well. So that's really my main priorities going forward.
Great. Jason, will you number 2?
Sure. Thank you for your service, John.
Thank you.
Number 2, how would you respond in an event of a federal crackdown on marijuana?
Well, as you probably know, I was in favor of Initiative 502 in 2012. I was the only, soon to be the sheriff, only police chief that was in favor of 1202 or 502, and was pretty active, pretty vocal about that. And since then, I've gone to Washington, D.C. I've testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee about how marijuana legalization would work in the state of Washington. I've done commercials for marijuana legalization in Oregon, where it passed. I've done commercials for Massachusetts and Maine, where it passed. So I'm a big believer in legalized marijuana, simply from the standpoint, or primarily from the standpoint of the war on drugs didn't work. It was an abject failure. And most of you know I was a foot soldier in that war. So I know firsthand that it didn't work. And with marijuana in particular, we incarcerated an entire generation of African Americans based on enforcing those marijuana laws. So it's really quite personal with me. But now we have a whole new ballgame because of Attorney General Sessions and Attorney General Trump. As you probably know, they funded the government through next September, and what they did is they continued the Congress's ban on the federal government doing anything about either legalized marijuana in the 8 states that have legalized it, or medical marijuana in the 28 states that have medical marijuana. So I don't think there's going to be any kind of a change. I don't think there's going to be any kind of crackdown. Like the question was, what will I do if there is, which I don't think is going to happen, is I will take to the bully pulpit again. I'm very good about that. As most of you probably know by now, I'm not only am I plain spoken, I'm outspoken. Because I really just don't care half the time. I'm going to say what I think. I'm not running for another office, except for this office. That's how we will fight the federal government if it comes to that. But I don't think it will.
Great. Ben, number 3.
What is your assessment of the technology needs of the sheriff's office to increase efficiency and improve law enforcement?
Okay, don't get me started. I have a reputation, and Chris can attest to this, but he won't now. I have a reputation for being a bit of a micromanager. I happen to think that's a plus. I believe in management by walking around. I believe management by asking questions. And when I came into the sheriff's office, we had one really technological change that was going on. We were going to a new RMS. RMS means Record Management System. All the reports that we write, all the follow-ups that we write, all the paperwork we do is in a system. Very complicated, very important. And we were well down the road. It was a $6 million bond issue that the county had financed to implement this new system. And for the first 3 years of my term, I was told everything is fine, it's going on just great, not only by my own people, but by King County IT as well, who oversaw it. Everything's going fine. Well, it turns out when I came in 2012, we were already 5 years into it, and it wasn't up and running. So by 2016, we were that much farther deeper into it, and it wasn't going to work, and it never was going to work. Now we spent $4 million, and I pulled the plug on it. So we are implementing a brand new system, still within the $6 million. So we're not going to spend any more money. It's going to work. It's going to be up and running on by October 1st. It's going to work very, very well, and it will bring us into the 21st century from an IT standpoint. In addition, the Seattle Police Department most likely is going to go to exactly the same program as we are, and it's going to be interoperable. That means especially my Metro Transit, Sound Transit deputies are going to be able to see what SPD is doing, the people that they're arresting, the problem aspects of it, and they'll be able to do the same thing as well. So that's really the biggest thing we have going on right now, is that RMS replacement.
Great. And Ben, number 4.
All right. How will you resist federal efforts to target immigrants and defend Seattle's status as a sanctuary city? Will you continue the current policy of refusing to honor every federal request for an immigrant hold at the jail?
You got a half hour? Because that's how long my talk about immigration goes, but I'll do it in 2 minutes. Okay, 1:57. Let's talk about the second part of that. First is detainer requests. A detainer request is nothing more than the federal government filling out a piece of paper, sending you over to the jail, which I don't run, by the way, but that doesn't mean I won't talk about it. So, filling out a piece of paper and say, Joe Blow is going to be released on Friday. We want you to hold him for an extra 48 hours because we think he's an illegal alien, and we may or may not, they say illegal, I say undocumented, they say he's an illegal alien, we want you to hold him for 48 hours, and we may get down to pick him up, and we may not. Okay? Now this person, what they want us to do is hold that person without any charges against him. So he's technically under arrest without any probable cause. That's a violation of the 4th Amendment to the Constitution. I've read the 4th Amendment to the Constitution. Nowhere in it does it mention 48 hours. It's absolutely, blatantly illegal. That's me saying that. I know a bit about probable cause after 41 years as a police officer. It's also 3 federal judges that have said that in Oregon, in Illinois, and Pennsylvania, and 600 other agencies across the country have said no, detainer requests are illegal and we are not going to honor them. I will never, if I was the jail director, I would never honor a detainer request. This is probably in this short 2 minutes, probably the 25th time I have spoken about immigration issues in front of groups, large and small, including about 150, 175 in Seattle here about a month ago, I guess. Really, absolutely an important issue. I can't begin to do it justice in 2 minutes, so I'm just gonna talk about the detainer aspect of it. There are 39 sheriffs in the state of Washington. Most of them are on the red side of the state. Every single sheriff in the state of Washington agrees that they will not honor detainer requests. So it ain't just me.
Great, thank you. So now we'll open it up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers, and I can read one on behalf of Liz Campbell. For you, collective bargaining is done with 11 separate unions, and ordinances passed are subject to the collective bargaining process. Can you tell us how you prepared to go into upcoming collective bargaining and how you plan to successfully include civilian oversight, including potential independent investigation and recommendations before final decisions are released?
We have a very interesting system in King County when it comes to bargaining. The county executive bargains wages and benefits, and I bargain working conditions. Now we do that, kind of side by side, but we sometimes differ. There was an audit done of bargaining, and Olio in particular, Office of Law Enforcement Oversight. The King County Auditor says that they should hire a third person to bargain Olio, tripartisan bargaining or something like that, which would be ridiculous. So what I said is, okay, I'm not gonna be involved in bargaining Olio at all. I will leave that up to the executive. So the executive is gonna bargain that aspect of it. And we're right in the middle of bargaining with the Captain's Union and the Police Officers Guild, which is 600 people. Olio needs to be bargained. It's in the contract, and it's up to the Guild to do that. I support civilian oversight, and I hope they get most of what was passed in the latest ordinance.
Great.
Would you be in favor of and advocate for legislation or another means that removes the burden of proving intent and acting not in good faith when prosecuting police officers involved in a fatal shooting?
Yes, I absolutely think they should take malice out of the statute. Good faith is probably okay. We can live with that. Dan Satterberg can live with that. The big committee that was formed in Olympia to talk specifically about that. At the end of the day, their recommendation was to take malice out of it. There was an ordinance or a statute that was introduced by David Frock that took both out. That didn't pass. I think they should absolutely take malice out of that particular RCW, and we will certainly, Washington state law will then match pretty much the rest of the country. That needs to happen. I think it's convenient for the prosecutors to have that in there, because then they don't have to file charges against police officers, which are very difficult cases to win just in general, like almost impossible. Even that case up in Everett, where they charged the officer with manslaughter, they couldn't get a jury verdict. But it will help Dan, it will help the prosecutor out if that comes out. So I'm absolutely in favor of that.
Additional questions? Clayton?
I find that I cannot forget the death of John T. Williams. And the reason I can't forget it is the element of time.
4.5 seconds.
Yeah. Because it has seemed to me that time has everything to do with establishing intent. If somebody is shot 4 seconds after an officer gets out of a car, in other words, it seems to establish that intent existed before the officer got out of the car. And I'd just like you to comment on that, because I try to make that one go away, but it just won't do it, and maybe that's the only justice that having else can offer John Williams.
Well, my answer is maybe. There is no one size fits all. Certainly John T. Williams is a great example of where de-escalation wasn't used. He got up there too close. There's just no excuse for it. I'm just sick that he wasn't charged. I think Dan should have charged him regardless of the malice in the statute. I will forever tell Dan to his face, you should have charged this guy. Part of the problem is the training that's in the academy when it comes to knives in particular. There's that 21-foot rule you've probably heard about. We drill that into officers' heads, and that's kind of a mistake, I think. But just in general, I think there certainly are times when you get out of that car and maybe you don't have 4.5 seconds and you're gonna have to shoot. So I can't use that as the criteria. I think the more global situation that we have to look at, and we are finally getting around to that, is de-escalation. We have to teach officers, and we do, it's mandatory now that officers consider de-escalation before they use force. In 2012, I said, officers are gonna have to use force, no question about that, but it ought to be a last resort, not the first resort.
Additional questions?
Thank you.
Kevin?
So you mentioned diversifying the police force.
Yes.
What specific steps are you gonna take to incentivize people of color, women, and so on to join the force?
Great question. When I came in 2012, every single month, to this day, every single month I go down and I swear in new officers. First 3 or 4 months I go down there and there's 5 of them. And I look at them and they're all male, they're all white, they're all high and tight, and they all call me sir, which tells me they're coming out of the military. Why do I have so many military people? Well, we're recruiting on military bases, that's part of it. But in the state of Washington, you get an extra 10% on your civil service test if you served in a war zone. We've got lots of military that have done that. So, and that's state law, I can't change that. So I started looking around and I went to King County Human Resources because they control the hiring process in civil service. I said, I want to add an extra 10% if you speak a second language. And they agreed. Now that doesn't necessarily help persons of color, but it certainly diversifies our workforce, and it gets people in to speak Spanish and Vietnamese and Russian and all those languages that we need in our community. And I'm kind of on a roll, so I said, I also want to give an extra 10%, anybody that's been in the Peace Corps for 2 years. And you serve the world, come back and serve your community. And that's 70% 70% female. So that's the first start, and then how we recruit has changed immensely for everybody. Those are concrete things that I've done. Only place in the country that's doing what I've done.
Any other questions? John?
Wanted to go back to the immigration question, just
Yes.
this time you're only able to talk about the detainer
Yep.
question. What are some of the other ways you're pushing back against some of the federal crackdown on immigration?
Well, what I've said is that I will not be shoulder to shoulder with ICE on any immigration raids whatsoever. If they come into our facility and they want to interview somebody that we have in custody, I will let them do that, but they have to identify themselves as ICE agents, and they have to be able to wear they have to wear a uniform that identifies them as being from ICE. I've said that I won't never be part of the 287G program, which allows local police to be cross-commissioned as federal immigration officers. I said that if they ask me if they can portray themselves as local police, which they oftentimes want to do, and they try to do that in LA, I absolutely will not let them do that. Now, I will provide security around the building, traffic control, something like that. I won't let my SWAT team work with ICE. If that's what they want, they can get their own federal SWAT team. And I've spoken out on it a lot. I've spoken to the head of ICE here in the region and told him exactly where I'm coming from on that. We will not be seen as federal immigration officers, period, and won't work with them overtly, period.
Okay, we have time for one more question, Jason.
In 20 years, where do you see law enforcement heading as far as culture and enforcement?
I see better educated. I see 50% women, hopefully. I see a better representation of the community. I see body cameras on every single police officer, which I think would be fantastic. I see a change in culture. That's really what I've been trying to do. It's all about culture. And culture, any organization, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft, is reflective of the person at the top. And that goes all the way down to the squad level in police work, but it's reflective of the person at the top, which is why it's so important that you pick the right sheriff, for one thing. And just like Kathy O'Toole, what she has done at SPD, which I think is fantastic. But as we go forward, I think we will be more and more a part of the community. We're still gonna have crime. We're still gonna probably have drugs. We're still probably going to have gangs. But I think the police will be a better part, be closer to the community than they ever have before. And we are much better than we were, or than we have been for the last 30 years. So we're getting there.
Great, so we're about out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
I think it's, I get blank looks oftentimes from people. Why should I care about the sheriff? You know, I live in Seattle or Bellevue or Renton. You're not my police department. Well, for the most part, that's true, but we still serve 500,000 people. A quarter of King County pick up the phone, call 911, and we respond. But it's it matters because I can speak out. I'm the only elected police chief in King County. I don't have to talk to the mayor or the city council. I can say what I think and say what I believe. So it's really, really important that you have the right one that's willing to do that and that's progressive. I am probably the most progressive sheriff in the entire country. I guarantee you that. And there are other progressive sheriffs as well, but they don't speak out like I do.
Great, thank you very much.
All right? Thank you.